This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living.
Well, welcome into part two of our time here with Michael Whitworth. Michael we could go through the list again of all your accomplishments, written many books, experienced grief, and that's what we're talking about on this episode as we pick back up. And man, I don't know that if you have just picked in on episode 2, I want to challenge you. You can finish this one out, but make sure you go back and hit up episode 1 because it was absolutely an amazing thing, and I was glad to be on to hear it, and I just want to encourage you to do the same. As I said, we're here with Michael Whitworth, Ben Hayes, my co-host in crime. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing great. Just awesome to be back again, and of course, awesome to have Michael with us. And we also have our other partner in crime, Will Myhan, who is with us, has some connection to Michael Whitworth. How you doing, Will?
I'm doing really good. Excited.
The man behind the bat gadgets,
right.
Will the Thrill
Alfred,
Myhan,
as we call him.
And we'll jump right into it, Michael, because we want to get this thing started, man. Like I said, just awesome content so far, and we want to keep rolling. So, tell us, we talked about in episode 1 that I feel like I'm in a Star Wars, but in episode 1, you talked about losing your dad, you talked about losing your son, and the sovereignty of God, and man, that was just that was awesome. I'm just going to say it. It was an emotional, I was over here going, man, I was trying to keep from crying myself. But, tell us some things that have changed for you. We touched on that a little bit, but if you go in a little more detail about, how you see things differently, you see, as we talked about, grief differently, and maybe just things in general.
Well, a couple of things for my personal life. The current pandemic, it shook things up for my family pretty severely because my income came from speaking at churches every weekend with these seminars, and now that's not happening. But one thing I keep telling myself, no matter how tough things may get, I remind myself, if you could preach your dad's sermon in your son's, or if you could preach your dad's funeral and your son's funeral, you're going to be okay. If those were the worst things that ever happened to you in life, I can't imagine things much worse. But if those are the worst things, then this is nothing. You can get through this. If you got through that, you can get through this. And then something similar for other people. I struggle with mental illness to a severe degree. I'm on medication. It's fantastic. It works for me. But my dad's death kind of uncovered the fact that I suffer from depression, and never was really treated for that. But after my son's death, I've had to get treatment. And it's a reminder that everybody walks around with some kind of handicap. Most of us don't have a visual tell that we have said handicap. A person comes in with a walking stick, I'm going to have to give this person an extra measure of grace. Person walks in and they're signing with their hands, I'm going to have to give this person some extra grace. Someone looks like they have Down syndrome, again, I'm going to give this person extra grace. Some handicaps have that visual tell, but not many do. Whether a person is suffering from mental illness, there's not always a tell. Or other things, they have a developmental disorder, otherwise they seem very normal. It's a reminder that everybody's dealing with something. Cut them a little slack. Be as patient with them as God has been patient with you, which has been a whole lot. It's just a reminder, you don't know what that person is going through in their personal life, or what's kind of holding them back, or what they're struggling through. So just be extra nice. Try to go that extra mile, because if you were having that same issue, you would be desperate for people to just cut you a little slack.
And that's the message. I mean, all of us are in this. We've got a thing in our 28 days of focused living, Team Thursday. And Team Thursday is just to remind us that, hey, really, honestly, and I'm not a, High School Musical guy by any means, but we are all in this together. And, show everybody a little bit more grace, and I'm stepping on my own toes, try to show my kids a little more grace, and my wife, and, total strangers, because you never know. You're absolutely true. You never know what they're going through, but we all have one. We all have something that we're dealing with.
And with that being said, what would you share with someone who's going through a similar experience to yours? I know you said we're showing grace to everybody because everybody's going through something, but maybe what's something very specific that you might share with somebody who's going through the loss of a parent or who's going through the loss of a child or both?
Well, obviously some of it would depend on where they are in that journey. It'd be dependent on what I thought they, could handle hearing, because, what I could handle hearing 2 weeks after and 2 years after is a little different. But with that said, I try to, in a very gentle way, I try to remind people the phrase "time heals all wounds" isn't accurate, but there is some truth to it in that things become just a small bit easier as you go on. Um, it's not going to feel exactly like this forever. You're always going to hurt. You're going to have days years later where you break down and have a really good cry because you miss that person so much. But I tell them, I don't want to say it gets better, but it's not going to feel this way forever. And you've just got to give this time. Don't let anybody rush you. You've got to give it time. And that's so hard, especially the way we're conditioned today. But you just got to give it time.
That's great advice, because it's I've heard it talk, and you've probably done this in your studies too, about rogue waves. Like you can kind of predict waves. And my wife and I and my kids were at the beach, and I'd stand out there with my kids, and we would wait for that one to ride, and I'd be like, nope, not yet, not yet. Here it comes, and you could time it. You knew when it was coming, but then every now and then there's a rogue wave, and that's how grief is. When you think, hey, everything's good. And I remember a scenario just about a year or so ago where Will came in the office and told me that, my girlfriend that was killed in a car wreck is family with Will. And he came in and told me that her parents had moved. And it was just that her parents had moved. And the rest of the day I was kind of in a funk, I was like, where did that come from? It really didn't make sense to me, but it was just a little piece of news. And, it's been 20 years nearly. And that's anyway, that, it was just kind of one of those moments where, you don't always get over every part of it, but there are things that do get somewhat easier, I guess. So.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was out in Utah hiking last week and came across some red clay on the ground, and hadn't seen a lot of red clay in Utah. Mississippi's covered with it. My daddy is buried under 6 feet of Mississippi red clay, and just seeing that red clay on the ground triggered me. I have no idea why, but I had to stop and just let that emotion, let that moment transpire, because it's the strangest, most random things, and it doesn't matter. You're right. It doesn't matter how long ago it was.
And kind of along with that, what are some things that you might say to their friends or family of the people who are going through these? We kind of mentioned this earlier, things that they can do or can say, or things that they could not do or not say that might be helpful to them.
Yeah, in the seminar, this is exactly what we talk about in the second session. I call it miserable comforters after that phrase in Job. He's just like, look, y'all are worthless friends. The day my son died, I actually read a book called, I believe it's called the Mercy of God and the Misery of Job. It's by John Piper, and it is a poem that retells the entire story of Job.
Wow.
It's a beautiful poem. And at one point, Piper's, giving his own voice to Job, kind of rephrasing some of the things Job says. But in the poem, he has Job uttering these words to his friends: "Spare me now your packages of God." I read that the day my son died. I will never forget that phrase for the rest of my life. We have to be careful trying to explain why these things have happened. My first thing to people at the funeral home: do not attempt to rationalize. If I had a nickel for every time someone has said something similar to, well, I'm trying to figure out why old Joe was taken from us. And I just think that God got up one morning in heaven and looked out on his garden, and it wasn't as beautiful as he wanted it to be. So he plucked Joe from this old earth to make his garden more beautiful. And I'm sitting there going, I don't have the time or the crayons to demonstrate to you just how stupid that is. Job lives and dies, hasn't the foggiest clue why these things have happened to him. And I have no idea why these things happen, and I can promise you, you don't either. So, trying to rationalize, that's not going to help anybody. Don't compare losses. I have actually stood by a widow. Her husband's in the casket. Her best friend comes to the funeral home, and it's her turn in the line. And she said these words: "I know just how you feel. My dog died last week." Now, I'm a big dog lover. Okay, no, Will, you were talking earlier about some losses you've had in your life and not holding a candle. It's kind of like surgery. Major surgery done on me. Minor surgery is surgery done on you.
Yeah.
My grief is my grief. It doesn't matter, where it comes in the rankings, because I think the cardinal rule of grief recovery: thou shalt not compare losses. You can't do that. Do not compare losses. Um, and we have to be careful. Another one: don't try to soften the blow. Death is not a blow that can be softened. We say that in things like, well, would you really have wanted them to suffer any longer? What kind of question is that? Or here's one that I've heard from a lot of people in the church: don't use the phrase, well, at least they're in a better place. Because cerebrally, I believe that, hopefully, but my real self is saying, no, they're not in a better place. My son is not in a better place. A better place would be still here on earth with his mommy and daddy being loved by his three little sisters. My son is not, okay, yes, I believe that my son is in a better place, but no, my son is not in a better place. Don't tell me that.
Yeah.
Don't soften the blow. This is not a blow that can be softened. The award for stupidest comment made to my wife and I when Daniel died, we had an older couple come to the funeral home and said to my wife, well, when you look at the moral direction this country's headed in, it's probably a good thing he died.
Wow.
And my response to that is, stop watching Fox News.
Yeah.
Wow.
Stop watching CNN, MSNBC. Get off of Facebook. Stop watching cable news.
I tell my students, no one needs an apologetics lesson.
Yeah.
During a grief. Nobody's looking for apologetics. And the best thing to do, and I know I don't do this all the time, and I'm not doing it right now, is just be quiet. If you don't know what to say, and really, even if you think you know what to say, it's probably best just to be available. And you were saying,
that goes along with the last thing I'd mentioned. Don't attempt to correct their theology.
Yeah.
On why bad things happen to good people, the problem of pain, suffering, what happens to the soul when we die. There are so many varying opinions on what exactly happens to our soul when we die. Do we go to a good and bad holding tank? Do we go to a neutral holding tank? Do we go into a form of soul sleep? Do we go directly to heaven or hell and then come back to our bodies for the resurrection? There's a lot of theories out there. I don't think that the Bible's exactly clear cut on that. So I think it's safe within those boundaries. Let people believe what they want to believe. I don't. That is not the time to start correcting their theology at the funeral home or thereafter. Even if something is way out of bounds, maybe something we might consider borderline just wrong or blasphemous. That's not the time to say anything. There's been a lot of things that the saints have said to God that bordered on blasphemy. That He knew. They're not their best self right now. And
you look at Lazarus. You look at. You've got Jesus, who does know the afterlife and how
Lord,
it works.
if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You want to hand Martha a towel to wipe the bitterness off of her chin.
Yeah.
She is, and the Lord doesn't correct her. He doesn't chasten her like, hey, you don't talk to me like that.
Yeah.
We have to let people grieve and don't attempt to correct their theology. Just as you mentioned, Travis, stop talking. Just be quiet. Let them talk. Let them talk.
And I think it's fair to say we've probably all said some of those things at some point. I know I have. I've tried to correct that with time. I'll probably still say something stupid to somebody at some point. So, this is not an attempt to necessarily make everyone feel bad. Well, it is, but we're making ourselves feel bad too, because I've done this,
Oh yeah.
I've
Well,
made,
number one, you walk into a hospital room and ask somebody how they're doing.
yeah, like, of course I'm not.
I do that every time, and obviously they usually give me grace and, oh, well, I could be better or whatever, but
Like me telling the TSA agent, when he says have a good flight, you too. It's
yeah.
something natural. But I do this in that second session of my seminar. I ask people, how many of you standing in line at the funeral home, whether for visitation or funeral, etc., you're waiting your turn up at the casket with the family, and while you're standing in line, you're trying to come up with what you're going to say. Almost every hand in the audience goes up, and the ones that don't, they're clearly lying. I know both, cerebrally, but also experientially, there's nothing I can say that will make them feel any better. But guys, I find myself standing in the line trying to come up with what I'm going to say. My point with that is the compulsion to say something in these situations is incredibly strong, and we need to fight that feeling with everything that we have. We think that, it's a little bit of hubris. We think that if we think hard enough, we can come up with that one thing that years later, man, Michael, I got to tell you, my daddy died. You told me that. That made all the difference. Man, that really helped me. 99.9% of the time, that's not going to happen. What's more likely to happen, exponentially more likely to happen, you're going to stick your foot in your mouth somehow, some way.
I love you.
Huh?
I love you.
Yeah, I tell people there are two things you're allowed to say: I love you, and I'm so sorry.
Sorry. Yeah.
I have yet to find someone who has said, I don't want to hear either one of those. I love you. I'm so sorry. I love you. I'm so sorry.
That you said that, because right before I preached my father-in-law's funeral last year, I worked with Dan, up in Huntington for 5 years. And Dan texted Lindsay, my wife, and myself and said, there's nothing that I will ever say that will change this moment. But the only thing that I can say is that I love you, and that the Lord loves you too. Yeah. And he said, and that's where I will leave it. And for those of us that know Dan's story, you look at that and go, Dan, that is the one comment I remember over 700 other comments, was Dan just going, I love you and the Lord loves you. And there's nothing else that I can say. And I look at that and go, if a man like Dan, who's been 50 years in the ministry, who's gone through stuff that we would probably never want to go through, if that's all he has to say, then that's good enough. So I think the other thing we want you to kind of hit on is, what are some of the things that, the brothers and sisters in Jesus did say and did do that did help or make an impact in your life and in your family's life?
Be present. Go out of the way to come to the funeral home for the visitation, the funeral, the graveside, whatever. Be present. I had people that I thought I was really good friends with. And, I heard from them sometime after, well, we were going to come down for the funeral, but we knew we probably wouldn't get to see you and Sarah very much. And so that's why we decided not to come. And I'm thinking, glad to know I was that important to you. If you had come down, I would have made time. I would have kicked everybody out of my house willingly so I could have some special time with you. You mean that much to me. There are other people, Tim and Pam actually just got in the car and started driving.
Yeah.
And my mom told me late that night, Tim and Pam were on their way. And my reaction was, of course they are. They're just that kind of people. Be present. Do the inconvenient thing. There were people that came to Daniel's funeral, signed the register. We never saw them. But the fact that they had been there meant the world to us. We couldn't believe, they had gone to that much trouble. And so be present. I interned in Murfreesboro at the old Minerva Drive congregation. I think it's like Salem Creek now, but Ron Harper's a great guy. And he told me some advice that summer I'll never forget. We were going to a graveside, and he told me, he said, they may not remember that you were there, but they will remember if you were not there. And so that's what I tell people, be present. Another one is bring food, but ask first and bring it and then leave. I like to tease the church ladies. I said, I'm onto your little game. When you hear that someone has passed away in the congregation, your first thought is one of deep grief and condolence and sympathy. Your second thought is, what am I going to take to their house to eat? They've got a nice supply of country crock containers in their pantry for just such an occasion. And so people have told me bring food, but ask first, because in the first 48 hours, the family's deluged with food. There's more food than they can consume before it has to be tossed out. Ask first. They're probably going to say, we're doing good on food. Um, call back a week later, three
I was about
weeks
to say
later.
that time period, a lot of times, you get hit the first 3 or 4 days, and then everybody forgets you.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't forget you, but you feel like they forgot.
Right. You're in the denial stage for the first couple of weeks. And when that denial wears off and anger starts to set in, that's when you're really not in a position to go grocery shopping and prepare meals. And so
Right.
people have told me ask first, but then they also said bring it and then leave. Sometimes we use that, opportunity to bring food to the house as our way to get our foot in the door and have that special time with the family. Bring it and leave. That's all you have to do is bring it and then leave. Um, Ask if you can do random errands for them. Take their clothes to the dry cleaners. There's going to be some suits that are worn that they hadn't been worn in a while, and they need to go to the cleaners. Or when Daniel died, Jeff Jenkins just chauffeured us around to, appointments at the funeral home and the cemetery and the like. And that was more helpful to me than just about anything else, because the last thing that I wanted to do at that point was fight traffic in DFW late in the afternoon. Having somebody willing to drive us around, that was a huge deal. Look for those little small things that can be done. They're going to make things a whole lot easier. Running errands and the like, that could be a big deal. In the aftermath, offer to go through their loved ones' things. Some people are like, over my dead body, will anybody touch my mom and daddy's things?
Yeah.
Other people, they look at it and they're just completely overwhelmed. And know what you can get away with. I kind of encourage people to think about that. Know what you can get away with. Be prepared to hear no, but you'd be amazed at if you're proficient in life insurance or whatever. Offer to help them with paperwork and all of that stuff that can get kind of tedious. Look for ways though to help make their life a little bit easier. Be prepared to hear no, but you might be surprised at the help they take.
Well, listen, Michael, we don't want you to give away your whole seminar. I mean, this has been great stuff.
Amazing. Thank you.
Stuff. And we are very appreciative of what you've done. Tell us a little bit, just real quickly, as we kind of get ready to close out, tell us how people can access the seminar. I know that you're doing it now sort of online. Yeah. You've got a book that they can get. So tell us a little bit about that so they can get to it.
Yeah, so the seminar is called Life in the Shadow of Death. And again, as I mentioned, I think in the first segment, it is a grief literacy seminar, not really grief recovery, simply because you don't have to have lost a loved one recently to get a lot out of this. If you just want to know what you can and can't say, honestly, one of the most talked about segments of the entire seminar is when I talk about miscarriage, because we do not talk about how to grieve miscarriage in the church. That's still something, we're good at bringing food to a regular death, but when it comes to miscarriage, things often are very, very different. So we talk about a lot of things more than just how to handle general grief. But you can find the seminar on the web at lifeintheshadow.com. You can get in contact with me there about something that I'm offering now. We have the videos of the seminar, and churches can purchase those to make available to their members for a fee. It's cheaper than bringing me in for a seminar. Most churches don't want to do in-person seminars with the pandemic going on. So this is a way you can provide resources on grief recovery and grief literacy to your members. You can get in contact with me for the details. But people, if they just want to, read a lot of my material, they can buy the book, Life in the Shadow of Death. It's available on Amazon and also from our website, starttofinish.org.
Well, very cool. That's awesome. And I'm excited to see some of that. I think we're going to try to provide a link to some of that on our website so that people can get to it, or on our email or on one of those. We're going to try to get that out there so that people can see it, because obviously it is some amazing material from just what we've talked about here.
What do you think of when I say school night dinners? Pretty sure you didn't think healthy, effortless, or relaxed. The back-to-school season is stressful under normal circumstances. Everyone has to readjust to keeping a schedule after a couple of months of the laid-back pace of summer. This year, the adjustment period will be even bigger shock to the system, since many of us have been home for almost 5 months due to the COVID-19 school closings last spring. The readjustment to the faster pace of the daily work and school grind will be stress-inducing for everyone, and new school guidelines like mandatory face masks, temperature scan stations, and social distancing practices may make little ones even more prone to anxiety, even if they don't say it out loud. This year it will be even more important for us as parents to be attentive to our kiddos as we get back to a semi-normal routine this fall, checking in to make sure that they are faring well mentally and emotionally, and helping them process all of the changes they will be experiencing. I know what you're thinking. That's easier said than done. There are so many urgent things that have to be dealt with every evening, like cooking dinner, packing lunches, doing laundry, and homework, that it's easy for the more important things like our kids' mental and emotional health to take a back seat.
Hi, Whitney, Travis's other half here. How about a week's worth of easy weeknight dinners for your family? We've done the planning for you. As a parent, the hours between the end of the school day and bedtime are precious. During the school year, our kids spend more waking hours with their teacher than they do with us. I don't know about you, but I don't want to waste the majority of that precious time in the kitchen. But I still want to provide my family with a healthy, tasty, and budget-friendly dinner. That's why we're giving you a meal plan with a week's worth of quick and easy, almost hands-free dinners for your family, complete with a grocery list. So you can take meal planning, shopping, and cooking off your to-do list. Now you have quality time to spend with your family. You can tend to the urgent and the important things and still have a relaxed, unhurried meal at the table with your family. Go to benandtravis.com/meal plan to sign up. We will send the meal plan and grocery list straight to your inbox.
Of course, Travis, as we like to close out most of these episodes, we like to close out a little bit more lighthearted with the humor part of the Healing Humor podcast. So, Travis, you got some questions for Michael to close us out?
Michael, what is your pet peeve?
We kind of heard one of these the first episode.
Yeah, I think so.
It's idiots on social media.
Well, yeah, I'll even be more specific. So there's currently a meme going around where a guy is saying that it is very demeaning to use the word sheep.
Yeah.
And he's directing it at Christians. Don't use the word sheep. And I'm just getting really tired of this sanctimonious attitude that people have. They're looking for things to get upset about and have hot takes over. Yeah, but sheep in a political context is a put down, but sheep in a biblical context is pretty accurate.
Get on.
We're looking for things to get outraged over. It's driving me nuts. You've got people that are all sanctimonious about, I can't believe these churches are meeting in person again. And there was one guy that took a picture of a packed church building from this past Sunday and just wrote, how selfish these people are, et cetera. And I'm thinking, nobody was there against their will. No one showed up for that worship service against their will. They did it because they wanted to. Now, we can question the wisdom of it, right? But that's even not our place. Everybody's going to make, I'm tired of people thinking that they know the right thing in a particular moment when, especially now we're learning stuff every day and we're kind of making it up as we go, trying to figure it out the best we can. The sanctimonious outrage, people, some of these people, I think they actually know better, but they temporarily suspend their IQ just so that they can get the likes and the retweets and the shares and all of that. And
Thanks,
that's
Will,
really
for getting him started.
I'm
Thank
working.
you for getting him started.
Pump it in my veins. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
working on it.
This outrage culture that we have is getting really, really old.
yeah.
And I've told people for the last couple of years, it's not going to end well. This whole thing about dragging up people's past and what they did when they're in high, nobody on this, teleconference wants to be held responsible for things we did in high school or let alone college. We recognize that's a time in your life where you do, your fair share of foolish things plus some.
Things.
But hopefully you go on to live life as a productive adult. That's really what's getting to me these days is there is no grace, there is no understanding, there is no introspection. The thing that happened last year where the guy was on game day and was just wanting beer money, and all of a sudden all of this money comes in, he gives it to like Children's Hospital or something. He gets sponsorships, but then the journalist finds some, tweets from when he was much younger, and then come to find out the journalist had his own tweets that he didn't want anybody knowing about. Just the hypocrisy of all this. That's what grinds my gears.
I'm with you, man. I understand. Well, hey, we're super thankful to you. That's probably the best word that we can give, because you're one of our first guests, maybe our first guest in this new era, if not second. I don't know. We're kind of the way this is going to pan out. But, I mean, we are super excited to have you and thankful for your information, your knowledge, your love for the Lord, and just some great reminders about what we should do and shouldn't do and what we can do to help other people through things. And so thanks for being with us. Travis, you got something, or Will?
Well, I just, I'm so thankful. We're looking for people who are genuine. And, that's one thing, Michael, that I can say about you. Like I mentioned, some of your posts right after your tragedy were very eye-opening to me and mean a lot to me, that you would be willing to share and be genuine and open and honest with your emotions. And I think that we live in a world where, and especially in the church, and I think that's what we're trying to do with this podcast, is normalize those things, that it's okay to have emotion. God made us to have those things. And I think you mentioned earlier, nothing that we can throw at God is too big for him to handle. And I think that that's the message that I've gotten from you out of all this, that it's absolutely okay to be angry and upset. But to your point, the sovereignty of God, it does not change who's sitting on the throne. And so thank you for your witness to so many people around you, that, that God is faithful to us.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.